OC done. Rick, this is the guy to call about. Thank you. Excuse me. We got heavy brass here today. Got the Kathleen Krager replacement unit.
I don't quite figure out what that's all about when they say traffic's running by you, the road is there. But now they're incorporating bicycles. Well, that's fine.
I drive that road every day. There's not every day. I'll drive it a couple of times a week. There's really not that much traffic on it. So. Which road? Cascade.
Oh, I wasn't thinking any specific. So what do you do? It's a traffic agent.
Oh. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for adjusting your schedules and being here on time. Hope everyone has been doing well. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. We have a quorum. All the alternates can vote at this point. So let me start off by reading the purpose statement. The primary objective of the CAC is to ensure the capital maintenance and public transportation projects and programs approved by the voters on November 2nd, 2004, November 6th, 2012, and November 7th, 2017 ballot measures are accomplished with PPRTA funds. This committee reports directly to the PPRTA Board of Directors. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda? Reb?
I move that we table item 8B till next month at the request of staff, county staff, or membership staff.
Do I have a second? Tom? Tom, second. All those in favor of tabling item 8B till next month, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? So moved. Tony, second from Ed. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Public comment period for items not on the agenda. Seeing none, anyone from the audience? Seeing none. Approval of the minutes for the August 7th, 2009 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those as presented? Scott, Larry, thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Ms. Bev.
Good afternoon. The June sales and use tax figure was $9,829,000, so $768,000 above the monthly budget. In year-to-date, we're almost $4.8 million above the annual budget. And we'll see what happens July and August, see if we get a little bit of a downturn. Maybe not July yet, but August because of the storms last year. bringing up the sales and use tax figures for last year, so. But that'd be in comparison to page 2, which is the actual versus budget year-to-date, and we're ahead $2,633,000, or 5.31%. And then the rest of these reports you get every month. Are there any questions?
Yes, sir, Carl.
Yeah, just a question about the revenue and expenditures. We have our public transportation fare, our fare box. We're running at, looks like our income is at 53%. Is that as of August, this August 13th, or is that a little bit behind?
No, because they're a little bit behind. I'd say that we've gotten July's in there, and that's it so far.
Yeah, it just seems like it was running just a tad behind. I wasn't sure if it was a concern or not, but we'll just watch it for the next couple of months, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
It's not a concern, right?
Yeah, they're kind of behind getting it to us because they do all their calculations and then we get it. And then at the end of the year, also in December, we get more when they do a reconciliation. So that's the way it's been happening. So sometimes it'll seem like it's a little behind and then it just gets caught up at the end of the year.
Any other questions on the financials? Great, thank you, Beverly.
And then the next item,
Go ahead.
is the budget calendar. The 2020 draft budget calendar is on the back of the memo page. And if you don't have it on the back of your memo page, there were a couple packets that didn't have it copied like that. Rick has a copy of it. But the calendar is really very similar to the prior year, just off about a day. And we're just looking for a positive recommendation to the board to approve the budget calendar.
We recommend the budget calendar as presented. Second.
Second by Scott. Any other questions, discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It was a recommendation, Joan, to accept the calendar as presented.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Item 6, capital maintenance and public transportation contract, City of Colorado Springs. Good afternoon, Mike.
Good afternoon, Jim, Board. Mike Chavez, City Engineering. I've got several things to go over here. We have 4 approvals and then a discussion item on the Centennial project. So first thing we have on the agenda is approve a change order. We extended the northbound turn lane on Nevada before it hits Nevada, the Nevada Vincent frontage road, and that actually goes from Nevada all the way to the first or the last entrance to UCC. Basically put another lane, and they ran into some really bad material. So the original estimate was about $189,000, and we had $90,000 in extra work, taking out the clay, putting material, fresh material. We had a geogrid, and there was one spot they couldn't get to stabilize, so they poured concrete on it. And that's one of those things where we could have spent maybe $20,000 to $50,000 having that potholed and gotten a good idea. We still would have spent that money to build it. So what we do a lot of times on these small widening projects, something is we open it up and just kind of see what's there and go with it.
That's already completed, though.
Yes.
Where is it? Now, I'm looking at the map as it's supposed to be, I guess, and I've got the Google, and I have no idea where it's at.
So it's basically what
CCS parking lot.
right as you head north.
So it's north of Austin Bluffs?
Winslow BMW is right here.
Oh, it's way north.
Yes.
This is
Yeah, just at the end of University Village.
So is that Trader Joe's at the very bottom? Was it 5342 there?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. This is the new veterinary hospital right here.
Yeah.
So basically, there was a little bit of right turn lane when you went north on Nevada to turn onto the Nevada-Vincent extension, but it backed up really bad, so we just extended that turn lane, through lane, all the way back to that next entrance to the university and to the shopping center. All right, any other questions on that one? Next one, we have bridge repairs at the Stetson Hills Bridge over Sand Creek. That is, we're using our on-call, and we had last year, earlier this year, we had a discussion on new limits, so we said that if we had any on-call that was over 750, we'd bring it to the CAC and the board for approval. So that's why this item is on the agenda for approval. But it's basic maintenance, bridge maintenance. It's just a high dollar one.
Mike, doesn't have anything to do with this bridge maintenance thing, but Sand Creek, all the way up from Black Forest Road down through across Woodman and all down through that area, has had some tremendous stormwater or erosion over the years. There was a lot of work done there at Woodman and Austin Bluffs and whatnot. It just seems like that area is very prone to stormwater issues. Is there an overall plan for that Sand Creek Basin that runs, that somebody's monitoring and looking at that other than at major intersections? Because I see some pretty steep walls that look like are pretty unstable that could fall into that creek bed from time to time. So is somebody watching that? I assume so.
To a large degree, especially north of Woodman, that's kind of open land. I think the developers have some responsibility. We've got the Sand Creek Bridge that we're going to start building here soon, and there's cut-off walls and riprap protection to protect the bridge. But I think as the developers are on the hook to some degree.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Mike, how old is that bridge on Stetson Hills?
That I'm not sure.
Well, I'm curious, these are considered, and being a contractor, I try to get out of any liability after the first year period. They get you on various things, and when I say that, that area is fairly newly developed. I'm saying that bridge would appear to me to be less than 20 years old, but who do you go back on? Because it sounds like there's some engineering problems.
There really, if it is 20 years, 10, 20 years old, there's no one to go on. It's our maintenance responsibility. And I think what we're doing is we do an assessment of all the bridges and come up with a plan and program to take care of them so that they last. So this work, even though it's pretty pricey, it'll fix I think it describes that they're going to, they've got sinking approach slabs, holes in the wall, so they'll redo the deck, put a waterproofing membrane, and just get it to a point so that it should last, a good 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. You should have had 20 to 30 years out of it to begin with.
Let me see.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, no,
And I don't think it's 20 years old.
And, Mr. Chair, I did have
I was there when I came here.
I did have a follow-up question from Reb's question.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, he actually asked, my question is, how old is this bridge? 20 years. If this bridge was built to today's standards, engineering standards, by the developer, how long would it be expected to last?
we hope our bridges last 50 to 75 years.
50 years.
That would be today's standards. So if we were to go back in time saying, hey, here are the new standards, we would expect this bridge to last without this type of maintenance. $850,000 is it's a chunk of change, definitely, and I was expecting that this would be, for a very old bridge, maybe 50, 70 years, something like this. But this one, 20-year-old bridge at, $850,000 just seems, and it's over the $750,000 number that we were working with anyway, so it's already going above that. I have to concur with Reb's analysis here that at least today, going forward, let's make sure these bridges last, you know.
Well, if we build them, they are, you know, like I said, but let me find out the age on that.
I'm concerned with duty inspection. Let's.
You know, okay, next item we have is it's a cost share with CSU for the the Academy Bridge over Cottonwood Creek. That project just finished up. We have actually two items. There's a gas and an electric cost share. So we worked out based on the age of the facilities that had to be moved. The first item, and let me get to that real quick. is,
90,000.
see, is that one? Hold on. I'm sorry, I'm trying to see if that's gas or electric. I believe that's.
First one was
Well, you've got
electric.
the first one is gas, second one's electric.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So basically, they have to relocate the gas line off the bridge. We chose a different route that was more conducive, and we did, so the cost share is 90,000 with CSU, and we actually worked and negotiated with them and actually got our cost to the RTA down from what they originally were trying to try to do.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir. Tom?
paragraph 3 in that description says roadway project to pay 40% of the cost, and then the next line says invoice the actual cost. That those appear to be in conflict with each
Well,
other.
they invoice the total cost, and then we take 40% of that. So it's a negotiated thing that we meet with them. But what we're saying is based on the actual cost, we're paying 40%, which is the 90,000. Any questions on that? Then the next item is for the relocation of some electric lines, same project, and again, the 40% of the cost share to the project is the 115,000.
Mike? So my understanding is after these two, in that particular project budget, you're going to have about 315,000 left?
No, because we're moving it to another project later on the agenda.
Well, that's exactly what I was asking. Okay, so that, I was going to ask, is that 315 going to be held for future, anything that might pop up with this? Because we've seen in the past things, 6-8 months down the line pop up for some reason.
No, it should be all warranty work with the contractor if there's any
Okay.
issues. Okay, and then, so then the next one we have is a discussion, so I guess we would need a motion on these.
Okay, so, excuse me. Item number 5 is a non-voting item. It's going to be a discussion. So I'd like to hear a motion to call a question on the first 4 of the projects, please. Calls a question. A second. Ed? Any discussion on the first 4? All those in favor of a recommendation to approve, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank
Mike.
you. Okay, so this is just a brief discussion on the Centennial Road extension that I wanted to basically kind of get a feel for what the board might think about this new proposal that's come up. So back in 2018, last year, we came to the RTA to talk about the Centennial extension, and there's a large undocumented landfill that the developer was on the hook to clean up. That agreement actually expired, and we were actually concerned that we were going to get stuck with that, but he wanted to, develop his property, so he had a VCUP, which is a voluntary cleanup of a dump site plan, and he came to the city and said, can we work or partner with this? So we came to the board last year and said that he was willing, as part of his cleanup, to clean out our right-of-way, get the trash out. And he had a price, a number that we thought was fair. And one of the reasons we wanted him to do is because he would be responsible in case there was more trash or more complications than what he thought there was. So he was out there working now, and he's run into more complications than he thought. One of them is the state, unfortunately, changed their rule or their opinion that it went from an existing dump to a new one, so he had more stringent parameters put on his cleanup efforts. And there's also some more groundwater is contaminated that he's going to have to pump out and clean in frac tanks before he can discharge it. So the big thing that's kind of hit him is that there's more trash to take out, and the state's not letting him bury as much of it as he thought he could before. So he needs more dirt. So what he has proposed to us is, and let me get to that.
Real quick, while you're finding that, Mike, you said you kind of passed by something, the state changed something?
Yes, his V-Cup permit expired, and when he went to renew it, they kind of changed the parameters. Basically, they made it I forget the technicalities, but basically he had to clean up more, and it was a little more stringent than his previous permit.
So the expiration of the permit, was that an oversight? Or?
Well, no, it wasn't an oversight. Basically, he had to renew it, and because there was a time limit, and from his original one, and when he went to renew
Okay, so it didn't expire, he went to renew.
Well, it might have expired, but that's kind of, permits for the state, they'll expire, and if you haven't gotten to them, you need to renew them. So he went to renew it, and at that point, they categorizes it.
I guess the question I'm trying to get at is, if it hadn't expired, would the original permit requirements have stayed?
I'm not sure of the details on that.
Because that's a big question. Because if we're talking about the fact that we're going to have to pick up the bill.
Well, we don't have to, but basically what's happened is that there's more trash, it's deeper than we had thought. And he had borings done, and we were concerned about taking that on ourselves because that tends to happen. So that's kind of what's going to happen is, as he's out there and actually started digging into it, he's found that there's more trash out there, and he's going to need more dirt to fill it in once he hauls it off. So his cleanup effort, his property is this oval area, and so he needs more dirt, basically. So he has come to us and proposed. Oh shoot, what did I do? So what he has proposed is that he will grade 1,600 more feet of the Centennial extension alignment, and also prep the subgrade for us so that he can use the dirt. And he has come back with a cost of about $850,000 to do that work. We think that it is, again, a good deal because this work that we're going to have to do anyway, we'll get it done sooner. Dirt prices down in a year or two when we get to the extension probably go up more. He's kind of looked at different projects and what it costs to move dirt around, and the unit price that he's proposed, it seems reasonable and fair. So we just wanted to see what, if there was any, we're just trying to get your thoughts or opinions on that. Basically, he's going to do work that's going to have to be done, and it'll keep him going on his project. Now, I don't think he's going to go belly up on it, but he did say that if he can get some more partnering with the city, the bank was more apt to give him more money because he's got to go get more money. My concern is that if we don't work with him, he may not. And like I said, I don't think he's going to go belly up. That's a possibility. But he might be delayed because he's got, the problem right now with contaminated waters, he's got to get a plan approved through state to dewater and decontaminate that water and before he can actually get to the dirt work. So if he gets delayed, then our extension project gets delayed. You know, is it 6 months, a year, 2 years, who knows? So we just think if we can partner with him some more, it'll just kind of add a little, reduce the risk that he delays, gets delayed. And again, we're not paying him extra. Basically, he's going to do work that needs to be done anyway. So I just wanted to kind of discuss that quickly and briefly and see if, what the thought is on
Well, it was
that.
that big pile of dirt that the Jeepers used running up and down. That's a lot of dirt in that big pile. Right there as you turn on.
Right across.
The existing one?
Yeah,
right
just
across.
south of the VA Center.
Oh, I'm not sure.
There's a big hill.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why, it hasn't. I would imagine that it would be more economical to just get it
From the
next
roadway.
roadway.
Okay.
Mike, I got a question, and it's general. They're asking the city, and you, PPRTA, in turn, to build a new road. To what advantage? I mean, what is the need for the road Centennial to go on to Fontanero? Is it going to divert traffic for the sake of discussion?
God, yes.
Fillmore, yes.
Fillmore's a
And it's
mess.
been on the city's master transportation plan since the 80s, this extension. And I think it'll help. It'll be, a tremendous help to
And
the traffic patterns.
But working with him, we are shed of any responsibility for the dump, which I have a real problem saying it's a new dump. Folks, I don't care if it, I
It's
don't.
not a
think
new,
they-
well, the classification that the state, environmental rules and regulations change and get more stringent but the bottom line is irregardless of that, what he is facing is that he needs more dirt, and there's a supply right next door, and he's willing to move it for us and grade it, and basically, again, it would be work that we would pay for anyway.
But he's assumed all responsibility for whatever's going to take place, and yet you're willing to set out, and you just said it may take him a while to figure out and get approval for a plan to handle the.
Well, no, he's got the approval of that, but the approval is, he's got to clean up the water and decontaminate before he can actually get to any.
But you said he had to have a permit for that and a plan.
Well, he has a permit, but that's the first requirement. He's got to get. Yeah, he's got to get
You
the
got a
water
plan
cleaned up.
first, yeah.
So if he doesn't do that, like I said, and we're just he's going to the bank for more money and to take care of his other issues, but the extra participation of the city just makes his project a little bit more viable to the bank.
So,
We don't have to do this, but I think the fact that he's responsible for the dump, and I'm really glad we agreed to pay him for, that initial $1.4 million. And I just think in order to keep things moving along, it would be beneficial to, have him move our dirt.
so I see this, and I think a year ago when we were discussing this, the 1.14 mil we've already ponied up, plus the 850K. You could look at that as risk management in terms of future litigation or stuff and having to deal with that dump and clean it up to specification and all that. Do you think with this 850K added to that 1.14, we're still getting a good deal?
Yes, because I need to pay for this dirt to be moved anyway. And this was just initial discussion. We'll come back if the board, the CAC here and the board, if they feel like they might want to entertain that, we'll come back with more detail. I just want to let you know where he's at and why we think more participation is still a benefit to this
Mr.
RTA.
Hoover.
If we don't approve him to move this dirt from downhill up, if we don't approve him to let him move this dirt from downhill up and use it in his project, and he has to haul in dirt from outside. What is it going to cost us to move that dirt when we get ready to move it? Is it going to cost us more than $800,000?
I think it would cost us more just because we're a year or two before we can get out
So
there.
then basically, he's doing $800,000 of work for us.
Yes.
I don't know that there's a question here.
Well, the question was about the state, but it's really academic at this point.
Let's back up. Are we talking about roughly $800,000 to be approved by PPRTA?
We will come back. We will come back with more detail and a more firm number.
How soon do you need to know? Next month?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Scott?
So what's the condition of the road grade going to be that we will need to go back and pave later? And how long will it sit there before it gets paved?
His cleanup, and if he were to go into the new area, he would prep it so it does, do the subgrade work for us. So it wouldn't just be dirt, he'd actually put the subgrade based on whatever the plans call for.
And then how soon after that would we be able to go in and pave it and put the ultimate
You know,
improvements on it?
if he's on track and moving, I think we're going to want to, he's got, I forget the deadline, now I'll get that, but he's got a deadline he needs to be done by. I think we will try to bid the project before his deadline so that as soon as he's done, we have a contractor ready to go to minimize that subgrade just sitting there.
Okay. Jane?
Once he moves the dirt and puts in the subgrade, how rapidly does that subgrade deteriorate over time? How long do you have to get a roadway on top of it before you have to start spending money to redo the subgrade?
If it sits a long time, we'd probably have to do a little bit of, it's not like we'd have to tear it all out, but we'd probably have to recondition it. And that's why I said we'd like to try to time it so it doesn't sit there excessively long.
Is that 6 months or a year, or what's the general time frame?
Yeah, it depends. If it's a real wet
Yeah.
year, it'll be worse. If it's dry, it'll be fine.
Okay.
So again, I guess I'm just trying to get a feel. Do you think that you, if this actually came as a request, would you be willing to support it?
Yeah.
Scott?
I was just going to say we're basically paying them to advance work we would have to do anyway. It's probably cheaper now than later. I don't see the downside to it, honestly.
Yeah, and I see that the landowner taking the risk for any future mitigation or stuff too that would otherwise cost us, so it's kind of reducing our risk and exposure to some degree as well, so.
And if it'll help move this project along, that's really important because access to the VA center is difficult now.
Gene?
How long is the contractor on the hook for repair, maintenance on the roadway if it deteriorates?
Oh, the subgrade?
Well, not the subgrade, but the entire area that he's working. I guess it would be the oval because that's what he has to pave now.
He's just going to prep the roadway bed for us. I'm not so sure there'd be a warranty. When we actually build the road, the contractor builds the road, would have a 2-year warranty.
With a 2-year warranty?
Yeah.
All right, in the oval area above where the land's going to be done, is the contractor putting that roadway in, or is the city?
The city would come in. He's just grading down the road and
No, the oval area.
yeah, both. He's not building any of the road. He's just getting the road graded and prepped for curb gutter and pavement. So that, yeah, we may have to go back and touch it up, depending on how long it sits there, and if it's really wet, if it's dry, you do, minimal work.
Okay. Any other questions on that project? Any discussion? Okay. Let's move on to item 6B. A request for line item transfer, Dublin Road.
Okay.
You said beer.
So, we are finished with the Dublin Road project and had some leftover funds. So we are looking at advancing 3 RTA bridge projects that previously we were not looking at being able to start the design until about 2022. So first one we'd like to do is there's a culvert under Fillmore near Coronado that's on the A-list project, and we'd like to move $180,000 to get design going on that. The advantage is, one, it starts, another project sooner than we thought, hopefully get through the A-list quicker. It also gets us a design and a cost estimate much sooner, so that if it is more than what we had estimated, which I would imagine it might, we'd have time and money to handle it.
I assume the reason for moving it up is because of the deterioration that was mentioned in the memo?
It's not so much that we think it's going to fail, it's just that we've got Dublin finished up, and so we want to.
So you could just move, okay.
Yeah, we're just trying to move
All right,
projects along.
But there's, on that particular one, they're about finished with the concrete work, and that's probably on the near-term list for 2A, up near Coronado on the repave. They finished that, so I'm assuming you would put this in if it, I don't know, can you get this without deterring the road, or?
Yes, we actually, it is deep enough, it's about 20 feet down
Okay.
from the road, so we're probably going to have a jack pipe in.
Okay. Don't want to mess up 2A's work.
Yeah.
2C, sorry.
Storm one.
2C, I'm sorry. Either one.
We're all, yeah. The other project we'd like to advance some funding on from the Dublin project is the replacement of the Union Pacific Railroad over Fontenelle Bridge. Now, there's two bridges there. One's the main line, one's the railroad siding. The main line is an A-listed project, and the siding is a B-listed project. We are actually going to try to probably do those together for economies of scale. But again, we'd like to get going on the design so that we have that design and the cost sooner. Better to know in about a year rather than wait until 2022 and whatever design time that takes, so we can plan and see how we'll budget for that replacement.
Mike, over the last 2 months with the board, there have been considerable questions by specifically 2 council members. We don't start any B-list projects with any number A money until all of the A-list projects.
We actually have an exception for bridges because the B-list bridges were put on there because they were bad. And so we have, Mark Dablin was the first one. Those were B-list bridges. They were deteriorating bad enough that they actually had a sinkhole. And one of the reasons that we thought it would, not only to avoid the road sinking in, we were concerned that if they washed out and collapsed and washed out, there's a 54-inch sanitary line above it, and for that thing to break and collapse and spill into Monument Creek would cost us millions of dollars in fines and lawsuits. So for that reason, they made an exception that bridges can be advanced because of safety concerns.
Where's that agreement?
I don't know if it was
Is it
policy. I don't know what it is.
IGA? Part of the
Was
IGA?
was that a policy that we did, or it was approved?
To go into emergency bridge fund is my recollection.
Yeah.
So that was part of the discussion they were having, that the program funds and an emergency bridge fund is one of them. It's going to take away from the A-list projects, defined A-list projects, whether it's, for the sake of discussion, Royer Street. Well, you're shaking your head. I don't know. I want a clarification of what it is. Well, they are having what the discussion with the board that took place, and it was rather lengthy and whatnot, was you're not going to take any A-list money and transfer, line item transfer, and do any B-list projects. These are listed as B-list, but they're the emergency. Mike just made the comment, if I'm correct, if I'm wrong, correct me, but we're taking A-list money to address you a B-list project because it is an emergency bridge problem. And it's a policy, I don't, what.
Well, it was an exception.
Mr. Chair, clarification. When you said you were going to do them together because it's going to be cheaper.
Well, we'd like to.
Are the funds coming from the same? Are the funds that you're going to do the main one, which is on our list, from the A-list projects, and the side track is coming from emergency funds?
That's what
But you're going to do it-
that's what we'll propose. We need approval. That's the thought.
You're going to do them at the same time?
Yes.
They're just coming from two different pots?
Okay, and that is an important clarification because I didn't get that from reading the memo. And it appears as they were going to transfer money from Dublin to do both projects, the
No.
design on both projects. And I accept that that was design, but if you're going to, in my opinion, if you're going to move a B-list bridge up under the emergency bridge fund criteria, you need to use emergency bridge fund money for the design of that bridge as well.
Yeah, and so, sorry for that.
That-
So at this point, we're asking to start design on the main line only.
Okay,
Later on, when I do the program update, we'll talk about. what we'd
okay,
like
so
to do.
you're looking for mainline only, which is an A-listed
Project.
project, and you want to use Dublin money to start that design process. Okay, now I understand.
Can I ask real quick, do you know any of the history? Because in the memo you mentioned that the existing bridge was substandard either in design or in materials. And I'm just kind of curious about if you are aware of any of the history going back on that.
Yes, we looked at the plans that were
It's too low.
for the, not only for these bridges, but the bridge over Uinta. And when they designed it back in the 60s, whoever did it, they didn't carry the reinforcing steel far enough. So there's areas that aren't adequately reinforced, so that's why.
Which is why we're getting the
cracks, and that's why we say it's only half as strong as it should be.
And it's too low. I can't get my motorhome under it.
We got a very bad motorhome now.
Move that up on a priority.
There, we will, they're safe. There's certain bridges that we monitor every 90 days, just because their condition is less suspect. But we're not going to have people drive over unsafe bridges. So,
Oh, Gene, sorry.
With regard to the discussion that we just had, particularly, I think it's with the Dublin Money, I believe this memo needs to be reworded to make it very clear that A-list money is going to be used for A-list projects and that emergency bridge repair funds will be used for the B-listed project that's being moved up because of deterioration of the bridge. So there's no ambiguity whatsoever.
I mean, I can look at it. It says, move it to the A-list, the UPRR main line. I mean, it's pretty clear there. We just will come back and make a request to use emergency bridge to do the other one because it's cheaper, it's better.
And for those who haven't been to the board meetings and heard the other discussions that we'll get into, not creating any or eliminating ambiguities in terms of using A-list money is important at this juncture in time, in my So.
That might be an understatement.
Okay. Then, and then, as we're finishing, then next, so do we want to look at, so that one.
So any further discussion on
We
item
recommend approval.
With the amendments.
with an amended memo?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we have a recommended for approval with an amendment on the memo. The amendment to make the memo clear that the main line is A-list?
No, well, it actually
not
isn't
verbally.
clear.
Doesn't say anything about being a project at all.
Then he needs to not say that in his
Okay.
discussion.
I can do that.
The siding is brand new to me, because the main line is an A-list.
Yeah.
just hasn't been in the budget yet. So by doing this line item transfer, you're adding it to the budget.
And don't say anything about the
Okay.
siding,
All right.
And
just-
then we'll be clear.
with both the West Fillmore over unnamed and the Bridle and the Union Pacific Railroad main line, both of them are A-list projects. Neither of them are in the budget yet, but by doing the line item transfer, you're adding them to the budget.
So just leave off any
Right.
comment or
Okay.
reference to the siding at all.
Appreciate the information, probably information that doesn't need to be passed along.
Okay.
Yes.
If I wouldn't have said anything and I come back,
Yeah.
I sprung it on.
No, I appreciate that you did.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve, Brian, we have a motion to
Motion to
approve the
approve
memo.
as presented.
Okay, and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
All right.
So 6A and 6B combined?
No, 6B.
6B, we voted on 6A already.
6A was the list of 4 items.
6B and 6C, I believe, correct?
B and C?
Right, and the next one is the Cottonwood Creek.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
Motion just made.
yes, B and C.
So next time we have is the Academy Bridge over Cottonwood Creek is finished. We had some leftover money, so I'm requesting to move $220,000 from the Academy project to the Galley Road over West Fork of Sand Creek. And on the ballot, it said just Sand Creek, but that was an error. The language and description of the bridge makes it definitive that it's the West Fork. So that's why it says West Fork over on there. It's an A-list project, and again, we're just trying to advance the design by a couple of years so that we can just get that project going sooner than later.
Important last statement. How you worded that last statement is important. He's moving it from, it's not in the budget, but he's advancing the design which would put it in the budget,
Which we also did on C.
which we also did on the previous one. Right.
Move approval.
Move approval, and a second. Gene, and then Tom. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
During the details of program funds. Okay, items 7A, transit services. Brian?
Good afternoon, Brian Vituli with the City of Colorado Springs Mountain Metro Transit with your monthly transit report. For our fixed route services for the month of July, we provided a little over 304,000 trips for the month. And so that's an increase of 12.25% over July of 2018. So that's really good news. And this, looking at this chart here on the first page, that's kind of an all-time high for the last several years, so that's great news. For ADA Power Transit Services, we saw a decrease of almost 3.5% for that same time period. And for our van pool services, we operated 26 van pool vans during the month with 148 full-time participants, and that's an increase of 2.78%. Project update, we're set to implement our fall service changes at the end of this month on Sunday, September 29th. As you remember, back in July, we had 3 public meetings where we gathered input. There was no information going against what we were proposing, so we're adding that Saturday evening service and Sunday frequency improvements on 5 routes. Two current planning projects being conducted now. We have our 2045 Regional Transit Plan and Specialized Transportation Coordination Plan. So this is the joint planning process with PPACG, where they are funding the specialized plan and we're funding the transit plan. We've had several internal project coordination meetings. We've conducted data gathering. We conducted our very first advisory committee meeting on Monday, August 12th. And I believe I think an invitation went out for the next one that's coming up here very soon. North Nevada Avenue Transit Connectivity Study. We just had our first two, it's the Project Advisory Committee and the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting last Wednesday, August 28th. Again, we've had some coordination meetings, collected data, got together the list of the members for both of those committees, and so both of those projects are progressing very well. The North Nevada study will be done just about this time next year, so that'll be about a year. It should be done in July. The 2045 plans will be done by the end of this year, and they'll be incorporated into PPACG's Regional Transportation Plan. We do have project websites for both of these, so if you go to our mmtransit.com website, go to About MMT, and then there's a link under there called Transit Planning Studies. So all the materials that the advisory committee members see, agendas, meeting summaries, PowerPoints, all of that information will be posted on those project websites. Sorry.
Go ahead, Chair.
Any updates on the transit center?
Well, yes, that was going to be my next item to say that, no, there is no update.
Good update, thanks.
Yeah. No, I know, Mr. Tobias, you asked last month if I could come back this month, and I thought we'd have some information, but we really don't have anything more to present. We do have another closed city council session, I believe, coming up this Monday. And hopefully we'll get some more direction and some more information out of that. So
plant microphones now is what you're saying.
right. So tentatively, hopefully, I can report out on that next month.
Mike, would you jog my memory as to the location or proposed location for the new facility?
Sure. Well, the top three locations that came out of the relocation study in early 2017, the top site was the southwestern corner of Saguache and Colorado Avenue. So that's where there's a piano store and the old U.S. Postal Service maintenance facility.
Parking lot.
The second site was directly across from the Pioneers Museum on the east side of Nevada, where the Colorado Springs Health Partners building was and the Independent newspaper. And then the third site was the 2 blocks of Pueblo Avenue. And we've been told the second and third site are off the table. So we're pretty much stuck with our top-ranked site. And so however that progresses is kind of where we're at now.
That puts it pretty much next door to the Olympic Museum, right?
Yeah, that's a block and a half or 2 blocks north, yeah. And right next to the rail line. So if there's ever passenger rail in the future, there would be good passenger rail access. Yep.
God willing.
Okay.
Mr. Chair. Platt Avenue westbound at Circle, CVS just put in a new drugstore there. They've done a lot of landscaping facing Platt. Did you have an opportunity to ask for a pull-out there for your buses? If not, why? because that makes a mess with the buses stopping on the street. And with all the construction that they were doing at the time, and the amount of frontage they're putting into landscaping, I would think that they would be more than happy to be a community partner and give us a pull out there. But the construction and everything is going on pretty quickly, and I would hope that if you guys haven't been able to address that, maybe we could.
Yeah. I'm not sure about this particular location. I mean, being a part of city operations, we coordinate with whatever, I believe it's Development Review Committee or something. We have staff that sits on that group, and we usually get development proposals and opportunities to comment on items like this. And I don't know if we declined or it wasn't a possibility. I don't know the particulars on that, but normally we do. I would say, generally if we're on a particular corridor and we don't have bus stop pull-offs, we would probably prefer not to have just one among other stops that don't have a pull-out. I would say we'd like to be more consistent. So like on Academy or Boulder and Platte or some of the corridors where we have a lot of service, if we don't have consistent pull-outs, we would prefer not to have like one pull-out among many other stops that don't have pull-outs. I think it creates a little bit of confusion for drivers. And on a lot of corridors, even Academy, we don't pull out of traffic. We just take the lane. And yeah, it does cause some situations, but it's very hard for us to pull back into traffic if we're at a pull out.
That to me is not logical at all. I mean, why stay stagnant if you can't improve the system? And if you're worried about your drivers, well, there are truck driving schools that they can go to learn how to pull on a pull out. And so what we're doing is we have, 120 drivers that we're concerned about, over 340,000 residents who drive around the city. And you're asking for a lot of respect for your buses, which I think is very important. But I think that when you get an opportunity to get out of the traffic while you're doing your stop, not only is it a courtesy, but it's also a safety factor, because then you don't have people sitting in the intersection of Circle and Platte while your bus is loading and unloading, because that bus stop is right on the east side of that intersection. And so you have traffic backed up all the way across Circle, and you had an opportunity to do a pull-out, and because you don't want an inconsistency because of your drivers? Well, please explain.
See, I didn't say several of those things. I didn't say we're looking to make things easy for drivers. I did not say that. I'm saying that we need to be able to pull back out into traffic properly. And I'm also saying that I'm not sure of the particulars of this case. I don't know if we were given an opportunity to comment. And if we were, I don't know if we requested or we didn't request a pull-out. I just don't know. So, I'm not saying we had an opportunity and we declined. I just don't know. But, consistency, I think, is key, because it helps train car operators. If they're traveling on Academy Boulevard and there are 2 bus stop pullouts and the other 12 bus stops, the bus stops in the travel lane, there's a little bit of confusion there, I would think. So, if we could have a blanket policy where every bus stop is a pullout and drivers can get used to that, I think that's great. But
okay, I'm going to let it go by now because I made my point. But I think the idea about whether a driver knows that a pull-out, he can pass a bus, or whether he has to stop behind the bus, the consistency is a spin. So I would like to find out if you guys are even offered that.
Brian, if I could, I'd actually like to add to Rick's commentary, because I almost had an accident on the way here because I was in the middle lane, and the bus that was westbound on Platte coming from Chelton stopped at the stop that was there in front of what used to be the RV dealership. And they put their blinkers on, the rear blinkers, the hazard blinkers, and the guy in the middle lane stopped dead in the middle of the street at the rear of the bus. And he almost caused, I almost got hit in the rear. I almost rear-ended the guy in front of me. It was kind of a scary situation. So I'm trying to think, I understand what you're saying, but listening to Rick's point, going through that intersection all the time, and that section right there, I would say from Chelton, both east and westbound on Platte, going all the way down probably to about Union. Once you get past Union, things relax a little bit because it's more residential, not as commercial. So there's not a lot of turning off and stuff going on. But I know you can't plan for the stupidity of drivers, but it seems like what Rick was talking about in certain areas that are really high traffic and in a commercial zone might be something to consider. Either maybe moving the stop to a more conducive area that's not quite so close to a major intersection or something along those lines.
Brian, I'd like to add something to it. One of the first two red light cameras was at Shelton and Platte, and literally,
It's a mess.
well, no, I never understood why, because I'm familiar with the area, but I've been traveling east and westbound on Platte quite a bit lately, and it amazes me that you're coming from eastern El Paso County, and the speed limit, they've even put up a stop sign, or one of those radar readers, and you're coming into town and you go from like 65, and you're supposed to be down to 50 by the time you hit Murray or approximately Academy, and they're still going 60, and I've seen them go through that traffic light, and Brian was talking about over in front of the RV.
Oh, yeah.
So right across from Walmart, which apparently a lot of the riders use to bus to get to Walmart, I'm just assuming that. But the traffic all the way down through there goes like the bat out of hell. They don't know what a speed limit sign says, even if Tony's there putting the damn thing up and says you're going too fast and flags. The red light cameras aren't going to do well. I don't know whether you're going to collect your $75 or not, but they've sure got a lot of pictures to process. You can check for the police officers. So obviously, the police and traffic people should have been aware of it, and maybe there's something that should be done, as Rick has suggested, because literally at the corner of Platte and Circle, you've got a bank on one corner, there's a new CVS, there's a Brakes Plus, and there's a
Dollar store.
Oh, it's a dollar store. I can just.
I know where the dollar store.
Okay, what does this got to do with his transit report?
What, it just has to do with something ought to be done to address it.
Okay, it's not transit's issue. The engineers over there, Mike will take a note.
No, I see.
Michael, pass it along.
I see Todd back there, and I was hoping he was listening.
There you go. All right, any other questions for Brian on transit?
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Sorry about that. All right. Item 7B, details of the program fund. So for those that weren't here, this is, again, our deep dive into what's behind those program pots, with an attempt to inform ourselves about what's in there, their purpose, and more importantly, to inform the board that we are looking at this and that they do have a very valid purpose.
As a side note, I worked at RTD in Denver, and they have the same thing. They don't like pullouts, and they like to stop on the far side of the intersection so they don't get stuck with the light. And that's just kind of a transit operating protocol that so it's not just transit down here that operates that way. Okay, so we have kind of another shot at trying to condense all this and explain all the programs that we have on the RTA2. So in their memo, I did add a little verbiage that we have 7 transportation-type programs and 5 trail programs, and they are A-list projects. These were created because we wanted flexibility, because, especially on the traffic side, because we don't know year to year what intersection or what section of roadway is going to need some work. We're just talking about Platte and Circle. You've got a new CVC pharmacy that, might generate more traffic, and that intersection might have been operating okay, and now it might get a little busier. And so there would be a need to go in there and make some adjustments, and that's why we have these programs. We have just a summary of how many projects each program has done. Citywide intersections, we've worked on 20 intersections. And these are listed in more detail in the supplemental spreadsheets that kind of tell where they are. And then on the pedestrian programs, the ped ramps, we didn't list every not the ped ramps, but the sidewalk improvements. We didn't list where we put sidewalk sections, but we just kind of showed the spending of where it went on those 2 programs. And then I got a little update on the trails. Cottonwood Creek was a program, and that one was specifically for Academy. That one's complete. The Midland Trail near Ridge Road will be done after the West Colorado project is wrapping up, or will wrap up soon, but there's actually a water quality pond that's going to go in there that's funded through CDOT, and when that's built, they'll finish connecting the Midland Trail around there. Right now, when you get under West Colorado on the south side, basically you pop up and the trail is kind of using the existing sidewalk and roadway. And then the other ones, we've got the Greenway program that finished the Uinta Underpass, and it's partially funding the Southwest Pedestrian Bridge. And then the other programs, one of them's in design, and the rest are slated to begin in 2020 when we put funding into them. Just gave a little bit of detail on how much sidewalk we've built with the program so far. And then,
Mike, before you start in the detail, just a quick question. On the traffic signal upgrades, is it about 300,000 per traffic for an intersection upgrade?
yes,
is that about the right number?
Yes, about the number they're targeting.
Thank you.
What was that number again? Sorry.
About 300,000.
About 300, yeah.
And if you take I think there's the 15 million divided by 60, it comes up to about 300,000. Oh, did this come out in the, what's on the overview? But one of the things I wanted to highlight was that there's been a lot of discussion about the amount of funding that's gone on to these. A couple of things, projects and the programs that kind of weren't anticipated is on the Greenway Trail. The board has approved $4.6 million to go to the Southwest Pedestrian Bridge, and the original target number that we had in that program was about 2.1. So my thought or my plan is to continue to ask for more money in the Greenway Trail so that Parks does get the 2.1 million for other parts of the trail. And that's on my overview. I'll talk about that. And then I just listed on the roadway safety. We had Sierra Madre, Nevada was something that, you know, a little bit bigger in scope than the typical roadway projects we've done. The board approved $6 million to go to the ramp match for I-25 in Cimarron, and $750 for landscaping, and then we have the spine road. So those are kind of additional projects that I think were larger and not necessarily anticipated when we put this program together. So I tried to simplify the chart. So originally, for the A-list projects, and not necessarily the program, but for the A-list projects, we had a rough cost estimate of what we thought that each project would be in the total amount for all the projects. So what we changed from RTA 1 is we pared the list down so that we targeted 70% of expected revenue as what would be needed to finish the A list. So what happened in the first RTA is we had a revenue projection of X million every year, times 10 years. So that was like whatever it was, $250 million. And we spread that out over 10 years. And that's what it would have taken to get through the A list. We had a severe downturn, which we were still able to get through the projects because we had the ARA grant, $30 million. But going into RTA 2, we thought, well, we can't assume that those revenues are going to stay the same through 10 years. So we backed it down to 70% of projected revenues and used that dollar amount to basically, pick how many projects we think we can get done with that money. That way, if we did hit a slowdown, we would still be able to tell the voters we got through the A list. And then once we got through that, if the economy stayed consistent and we got 90% or 100% of projected revenues, we would be able to go on to the B list. So that's why we budgeted really only the first 7 years. I think the staff's thinking was the programs would be funded all 10 years at the level that we kind of start out with, because the programs really didn't have a defined list of A-list projects. And again, from year to year, there are needs that come up, and they're not going to stop at year 7. So our thought was we would actually fund the programs through all 10 years. So the first column basically shows what our, it's not even an estimate, just how much we plugged in based on taking care of the projects first, and whatever was left over, we distributed among the projects. And this is the numbers that are getting disputed are really only years 1 through 7. The next column shows what we have actually approved to date, and spent encumbrance, what we spend or we have contracted. And then we have planned projects, and those are projects just that we anticipate. They're kind of in the budget or they're on the planning radar, but we just haven't gotten to them. And then the future projects is basically what's left over based on the current budget. And I showed that because there was a lot of talk about or concern that there was millions just sitting around unspent, and I'm just trying to show that we actually have plans. And the intersection improvement project is probably the biggest one. It's got $1.2 million, and we've got projects that we know we can use that on. So I was just trying to show that we have spent or plan to spend the majority of the money, and then we've got a little bit left over, but there's needs for those future projects as we speak now.
Mike, so going into the 2020 budget, one would expect, if those are approved, that the PPRTA approved budget number would go up for the amount that's in your 2020 budget.
Well, it depends on how much care, so we'll budget to, and I think we got, was it Bev, 40 million for capital? So that's the target. So
be the carryover plus any new money.
Mm-hmm.
So that number would change to reflect your 2020 budget.
Yes.
Okay.
And again, we're still only mid-year, so we probably will spend more, or tap into those
Okay.
available funds.
Make sure I understand.
Okay, so is there any question on this summary? Okay. So real briefly, so,
Maybe Carlos had a question?
Yeah, I did have some questions, but perhaps you might be able to answer them when you continue with the presentation. So I'll hold my question to the end, but I do have a question about this chart.
okay.
Rick?
Mike could explain the negative on the right-hand side of the last line.
Greenway project?
Yeah, let me get to that one within the detail sheet.
All right, let me just, one comment, Mike, about the whole chart here. I think there were three statements that you made that, in my opinion, are crucial for the board to hear. Your first column, you said that represents what you expected to fund on all of the non-program A-list projects for the first 7 years. Because you said that was your regular A-list projects. You guys rolled back and only targeted 70% of expected income. And your programs, you expected at that point, the juncture for RTA 2, for your programs fund, you expected that funding to go through all 10 years.
Yes.
Okay. That's an important statement from based on the comments that some of the board members have made, and so I wanted to thank you for saying that, and make sure you say it next week.
Okay.
Hey, who's paying you for that?
Okay. So, if there are the spreadsheets that are behind the memo, just a little more detail, just shows the first one, citywide intersection improvements, just shows what intersection we worked on, kind of what we spent so far, and then what we plan on spending. And so, if you look at that one, if you look down at the planned projects, the first big number is $1.5 million for overmatch for Prentice Parkway. We are real close to bidding that project. We're just waiting for some clearances from CDOT. So the project's it's about $2.5 million.
What is HES overmatch?
Hazard elimination
Okay.
study.
Okay.
So that one's a grant project that we've overmatched. So we're planning on spending that money, if not fully this year, into next year as we finish that out. Same thing with the Tejon roundabout. You approved $600,000 to overmatch that grant, and we're looking at needing to spend about 180 of that. That's the construction part. There'll be some leftover money, but the planned project are basically we have projects underway or nearly underway that we'll be spending that. So in the summary below, you've got the approved budget, and that's what has been approved, not the estimated, end of program. What we spent and have contracted. The planned projects are basically, we have definitive projects that's going to be spent on, and then the future projects that's the available. And like I said, the intersection safety is probably the largest one, but if you look at the other ones, there really isn't as much available on them. So I don't know if there's if there's not any questions, I was just going to jump to the Greenway Trail.
Oh,
Greenway Trail.
Mr. Chair, I just had a question for Mr. Chavez. You brought up the hazard elimination study. I'm glad you brought that up. There's Austin Bluffs and Rangewood. Is that the intersection near the YMCA Family Place, or is that the intersection near the Walgreens? There's two. It crosses twice, Austin Bluffs and Rangewood. Which intersection is that? It happens to be an interest of mine, and that particular, especially one in Briargate, which there was a fatality there at I think it was like a three-way stop there, and it's a big problem in that neighborhood. That'd be good to know.
I think it's the one by the Walgreens.
Yeah, that has a lot of traffic going through that, and like towards Stetson Hills and so forth. Okay, I was just curious at which intersection that was. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll verify that.
If you can verify that, that'd be great.
Okay. So on the Greenway Trail summary, we we show what we spent, so we've got the Southwest Bridge and the Uinta Underpass as, that's money that's been committed or spent. And then Park and Rec has some plans for the trail along I-25, and these are 3 projects and 3 rough estimates that they gave to me. So when you start plugging in the numbers of what's approved, what's going to be spent on, what has been spent or will be spent on the bridge and underpass, that, and then they've got $1.5 million, $1.5 million of planned spending. If you subtract the spent and encumbered and what they want to do, there's a negative $500,000, which I put that in there because I am looking to, supplement the Greenway Trail in 2020 so that they can complete their initial, not wish list, but the initial projects that they wanted to do, so that they don't, get, penalized because, some of the money went to the bridge. So that's why I showed a negative, is that I'm planning on coming back and asking for money in 2020.
The money that was Ross.
That was utilized. It wasn't robbed. So.
Well done. That was good. That was good.
I'm on to you, Brian. Anyway, so that was just what I wanted to talk about on the bridge, or the Greenway Trail, why there's a negative number. And then, real quickly, is there any questions on that so far? There had been a request to go over the emergency bridge funds, and I didn't get that in your package, so that was the handout that you got handed today. And if you look, so basically, completed bridge projects are listed, and we spent about $4.4 million. On there, you'll see Rock Rimmon was actually a general fund, a grant project, but it was short of funds, so we used the emergency bridge to supplement and leverage it. So we completed that bridge. It's a B-list bridge, but we had other funding, so that's why we started it. But the emergency bridge has been utilized to make sure we can complete these bridges. Mark Dabbling was a major safety and public health concern, so we moved those up. They are B-list, but we did fund them out of the emergency bridge because we thought it was important to get those done. Fascination and Enchanted, these are 2 bridges in a residential area. Enchanted was a A-listed project, but Fascination was right next door. It was, what it was manhole riser sections that were put on their side together to build the bridge. They're not structurally built to carry loads that way, sideways. So there was a safety concern, and again, for economy of scale, we thought, let's get both of those designed and finished together so that it's cheaper, and then also we didn't want to leave Fascination undone because we knew it was potentially going to fail. Again, we're Colony Hills. Again, we're just supplementing with Emergency Bridge Fund to supplement a general fund project. The general fund portion was 1.3. Planned projects, again, the similar thing. We're using the Emergency Bridge Fund to supplement some grant and general fund projects. And here's where we'll have to come and make a request, but we would like to get approval to use about $500,000 to start and design the siding on the Fountain Arrow Bridge. Again, it doesn't make sense to have 2 bridges side by side and only work on one, to design it and build it when we can do it. So in the near term, we're looking at seeing if we can get approval for $500,000 for design. And then if you go to the future projects, and this is going to have to be approved, but we have Cheyenne Canyon Bridge. We got a grant to design and build those bridges, but we're not sure that for the $2.8 million we can build all 3 bridges. So what we'd like to do is request $2.5 million out of the emergency bridge, and I'll have to budget that so that we can do all 3 bridges. If that is denied, basically, we will only probably build 1 or 2 bridges. And the other thing that we're looking at funding, and this may not necessarily be 2020, but we'd like to also get $2 million to design 4 bridges, because there's grant opportunities to get those built, but if you have a shovel-ready project, you have a better chance of winning those awards and getting those grants. So, again, this is just, Aaron's just kind of proactively thinking, if we can budget the money, let's get that in the program so we can get these designed and then go after federal money, so that the RTA doesn't have to pick up the construction costs. So that was kind of just a summary of the bridges. If you look at my summary, there's $2.8 million available. If you subtract the planned projects, which is the $1.3 million, basically we have about $1.5 million available, which we'd like to keep there for an emergency. If something goes south on us unexpectedly in a storm or whatever, we would have money to go and take care of that.
Cheryl had a question.
Thank you. I'm concerned that, I understand this could have been an emergency where you'd had to go in and do rock rimming or mark dabbling, and fascination. They're all B-listed projects. Did you approach the other member entities saying you needed to do this, and they might not be able to get their A-listed projects done because they didn't have the money?
Well, I don't think that's the case. I'm not sure, I haven't seen the county's budget, but building these projects, these B-list projects, hasn't impacted us being able to finish our A-list. And I think if you look at it, we used small portions of RTA money to help fund, grants or general funds. So, like the Rock Rimmon, that's a B-listed project, but we, for $21,000, we were able to build it because we had $800,000 of grant money. So the only one that really moved forward and was a big chunk of money was the mark dabbling. And again, the risk and liability that we had there, we just came to the board and said, we really think this is important, and we need an exception for bridges, and they granted that. But this is the city's portion. It's not like we're taking it from the RAMA or the county.
Yeah, but I thought that my understanding was all A-listed projects.
Yes, and that's the policy and the guidelines. But for bridges, we came to the board and said that we'd like an exception because,
Not specifically, but
the bridge safety is of the utmost important, and we, so we listed all the A lists that we could afford, saying we think these are the worst bridges and we need to replace them. But the B list were like, these are bad and need replacing too, but we think we got a little more time. But if a B list bridge fails, we need to fix it, and that's why we have the emergency bridge fund, and that's why we came to the board for the exceptions, because we can't leave a failed bridge. We could close the road down, but that would be terribly inconvenient to the public. So that's why we talked to the board about why we need to do B bridges sometimes.
Rick had a question, maybe.
I just want to be clear on this, and if I am, Mike, I'd suggest that you add a few words on the term future projects at the bottom of each of the pages, detail pages, that implies not yet budgeted or unbudgeted. Is that what that means?
On the bridge, it is unbudgeted. Actually, on the other programs, there is money there. That money has actually been budgeted. It's just we don't have a defined project or projects identified for them. So I can make that clarification.
All right. Gene, let me ask this question, please. In your other column, Mike, what What do those dollar amounts in your other column represent?
Those are, well, like on the first one, Rock Rimmon, that was a grant. We had $800,000 of grant money.
So that's other funding.
Yeah. Let me, clarify that.
So in Las Vegas over Colony Hills, that $1,350,000 was general fund
General
money?
fund.
Okay, all right. Gene?
I think you just asked a question, Ruth, so I'll go on. Press.
Okay. Who had one? You did, oh.
Me. Mike, so you're going to try or ask for the board to approve a budget that would include $1,300,000 for B-list items or program items, and then an additional $4.5 million for future projects to come out of the general, out of, quote, in your case, the Colorado Springs budget, for the sake of discussion this year, will be around $40 million for capital improvements.
The 1.3 is already there. It's been budgeted. So we're looking at using it for Verde, Paseo, Colony Hills, Wooten. The only one that needs to be approved or is
So you're going to ask for
is the-
2.2 to do the future projects?
I'm not sure. I'm just saying those are needs, and those are. I'm not sure. We're not sure if we are going to ask. We're just trying to show that we have the current money we have budgeted and allocated, with a little bit left over to hold for a true emergency, and not sure what we're going to do with the Cheyenne and the design. We may ask for it. I'm just trying to show that there is a need to continue funding the emergency bridge program.
Right, yeah.
I guess is what I'm.
Right.
That's the point of showing those future projects.
We'll see what he comes forward with in 2020. Gene?
Just so that I'm clear on this, I think I am, but the funding that you've listed under PPRTA funds comes out of a pot of money that was designated for emergency bridge repair and is not the same pot of money as capital projects that fund Category A or PPRTA and B-listed projects. Is that correct?
Well, the emergency bridge fund is an A-listed project.
Okay.
It's, if you look, and I don't have it, but if you look at Academy and all that in there, alphabetically, emergency bridge fund is in there, and it's been funded every year.
All right. Thank you.
Did this help?
Did I at least dissuade you that there aren't millions of dollars sitting there unused and just collecting dust?
Carlos?
I just want to go back to the previous chart.
I just want to go back to the previous chart, back
This
to
one?
it was the, yeah, actually, yes, that's the one. Yeah, no, by the way, I want to say this has been very good information. I feel, though, it has been a little larger in scope than what the board had originally looked at when they called them the vague programs. I don't think the emergency bridge category was considered a vague program, or the trails program. By the way, it's been very good information. But the concerns were, I believe, if we zero in, were those 7 program items for, well, basically the programs, okay?
Which are-
Not the
yeah.
trails,
Oh.
not the emergency bridge fund, not the Pikes Peak Greenway. The concerns were specifically what they were called the vague program. So I want to kind of just zero in on that. I don't want to pick on it. By the way, this is all good information, but I think it's bigger than the question that was asked by the board. All right? So let's go, let me look at the presentation. So I'm just trying to answer the questions that the board had specifically. Again, I don't think they raised any questions about the emergency. I don't think they considered this a vague program item.
Well, there was a request that we have an update on that, on the emergency bridge. That's why I brought it.
Well, yeah, no, and I think it's good information. And by the way, I'm glad to see, because I've always had some questions about, Pikes Peak Greenway and the trails, being a, an advocate for trails and spend a lot of time on there. let's go back, I think it was the one, pedestrian improvements. Let me pull it up here, because it's hard for me to see it. Just a moment. The pedestrian improvements. Future projects is, let's look at this right now. The current budget item for pedestrian improvements that's in Bev's report, if we go back to its 10-year capital, it's $6 million is the new estimate. I'm going to focus in again on just the pedestrian improvements, transportation improvements, and we're looking at a revised project cost estimate of $6 million for the 10 years.
Okay.
Why is that not here on this chart? The forecast. I know we have future projects, but we also have the run out for the next 3 years after 1 through 7. So if I see that, you see $5.1 million for pedestrian improvements. That's currently in years 1 through 7. Based on this current budget, would I expect about $850,000 to be funded for the next 3 years? For the next 3 years after 2020? Would that be the expectation?
Yes, I think that's what we're hoping, but there's been talk and concern that we've hit these.
No, what do you mean by hoping? I mean, it says $6 million here. Is this a number I can rely on, or is it revised project cost estimate? Is it going to be revised downward? Is it going to be revised upwards?
We should be able to do
Carlos, what page
5
are you
and
looking
8.
at on Bev's report?
Look on her report, or when I say reports, it's just a budget estimate. I understand that. I know it's a forecast. Page number 9, the very top, column 3. Citywide pedestrian transportation improvements, phase 1. This is a report I look at, to see where, we're at spending-wise. Revised project cost estimate, $6 million.
So with that number came from this 5.1 that we had shown originally, and then there's been a couple of budget years where we put, and then that was like, I forget, is that $850 a year or $624?
Is the goal to get additional $850,000?
Well, no. So I think we looked at funding. If you divide that by 7, I think it was $624,000 a year. So. So the reason you're seeing $6 million is because there was a couple of years where the budget of $624 was done, and then we supplemented those years because Ryan needed more money. So what Bev is showing is the original 7-year plus those little increments, and that's why we actually kept that out, because the revised estimate, it wasn't budget, revised estimate, were really large, and that's where we're getting a lot of concern that we've exceeded the budget by twice as much, where we haven't, because the budget from the city's view is what's actually been approved.
Well, Gene brought up a good point. I might actually point out, I may have misread it. Is there any way to bring up page number 9 of that financial report back up on the screen, or have everybody refer to it?
Back to Bev's report?
Well, I may have. There's a question, actually, of that number, $6 million, versus currently what we have, our original project estimate is 5.1, but there's a column there, third column of that. Well, how am I supposed to read column number 3? The third column says revised.
That's not Mike's question, that's a Bev question.
Okay. Is Bev here?
She's in the hallway. Bev?
Bev, you're being paged. Yeah, now this is good information, but we've had these reports for a long time, and I've been reviewing these, and now we have this, and I'm just trying to reconcile and understand in light these numbers here.
All right, let me just say this. When Mike proposed this chart,
He's given it to me.
Okay.
And it's hard to figure out because, do you add the 7, which numbers do you add, this one and this one, but these 3 equal this one. But this format has changed about 5 or 6 times. So
Can you say in the microphone?
the last.
Oh. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt it. The question is, how do I interpret third column of this report?
Yeah, and I think that's where the original 5.1 was $624,000 a year times 7, and that's the estimate that Bev has used now. And I not sure what years, but there was a couple years where we put more than 624,000 into the program. So that third column is basically the 5.1 plus any extra money, and that's where you get 6. But I think we're kind of may get rid of that column or try to explain it that's so what we have is we're at 3.7, and the original target or number was 5.1. That 6 is if we funded every year for 7 years, plus the 624 and any extra in the past years. That's where we'd be.
Yeah, I understand. It's a forecast, but for...
Yeah, well, that's
And I apologize, Mr. Chair, I'm just trying to understand what we're reviewing here. But the report that the budget forecast outlook that went to the board several months ago shows for the pedestrian improvements for years 2023 and 2024, there were no amounts there. Is there an expectation then for the pedestrian improvements that there would be no money for pedestrian the sidewalks, the missing sidewalks program, for the years 2023 and 20? Are we expecting a drop-off? We have it sustained for a period of time, and then we just
the city, we're going to propose that the programs continue getting funded through the 10 years at the amounts they were, or if we need to adjust them down because we need them for the projects. But that's what we will be requesting. Now, whether with the current questions or concerns, whether they actually approve those is up to them.
And where is that shown? Where is that request shown for the next, 20?
All right, let me interject
Well,
here.
we haven't gone there. We should go year to year.
Let me interject here. This is where I suggested not putting that on here for this first step to the board. Show what's currently budgeted and approved, what's been spent, and what's planned to spend. When we go into, starting in November, we go into the budget process, we'll show what we're going to fill in beyond what's currently approved. Because Bev's number was different based on an estimate at the time. The city's numbers have changed a little bit, and it was too much explanation trying to go on, and I found it confusing. And so I asked the staff and Mike to let's stick with for this first step with the board to keep what's currently approved budget, not what was estimated for 10 years, because it's the perception of some is that they've exceeded all of the funding that they estimated, and therefore they shouldn't receive any funding. And so my recommendation was that we show what has been approved through the first 7 years, what they've spent to date, and then as we go through the budget process, we'll fill in and add on and show what they're planning to request for the remaining portion of PPRTA 2. Because there's just too much explanation. If you add column 1 and column 2, you get more than column 3. And so it was now it involves explanation for Bev and her format and her stuff. This was a city's report out on the plans. And so you can yell at me and be mad at me, but I felt like this was the most simple way to start this discussion and get to the meat, and that is we're doing meaningful things, we've got the flexibility we need, and we plan on continue funding them.
I just want to comment that I was one of the ones that had a problem with reading it last month. This is wonderful. I mean, you can follow this right across, and even I can understand it. So I thank both you and the city.
Thank you.
Bev, did you want to say anything about your column 6 or what I just said?
So when this started, we met with Mike, Rick and I, and we tried to get to the revised project process. And like you said, now this exercise is different. So the capital expenditure report renewal second 10 years report, that revised project cost estimate, it changes all the time. If they get line item transfers, and you can't, I can't nail this down, that number, because it's any future amount that they should ask for. And we just want some kind of estimate.
Yeah, and that's my question, is that this is a number where it's an aspirational, but I'm looking at, if someone asks me how much are we spending for the city of Colorado Springs, or would like to spend over 10 years, and it's a forecast, the number I give them is $305 million. The number I don't give them, we're at $201 million, and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. That seems kind of, I do appreciate and understand that the TMI, the too much information here, but this idea that there's this cliff that happens at the end of year 7, and we don't know what's going to happen for years 8, 9, and 10. I'm just a bit incredulous over that. I think I understand that maybe we need to present it in a different way, but it seems to me very useful to look at the entire and amortize this entire program over 10 years and understand what we would like to have or what we forecast to have so we can plan for it, because the concern is that specifically, the concern of the board specifically is the pedestrian projects. We've spent too much money on it, and it's acting in a detrimental way on the B-list projects. That was specifically the concern they have, and I want to make sure we zero in on that specific concern, because I don't know if it's going to be, this clears that up, if it addresses that concern. I think it's still going to be there based on the information I've seen.
Well, we did show last month when I brought to the CAC, I did show, if we funded 10 years where we're at, and I think in consulting with Rick and Jim and Bev, that we thought, well, that's going to add confusion, and especially in light of the concern, because we thought that we would just fund these programs through 10 years, but there's talk, and there might be a cliff where, it could be cut off. And so what we're trying to do is show, hey, we haven't exceeded the numbers, and here's where we're at, and I think that we want to leave it at this point, and then when we come to the budget presentation, we're going to show for 2020 why we want to continue programming money into the programs, because we have definite, legitimate projects that are sitting there, or safety concerns, and not necessarily just say, let's just, we'll use the money somehow. I think we're trying to be more precise in why we're asking from year to year. And it might be a thing where, if quite frankly, if the board wanted to say after 7 years, we're going to cut off, I would make the argument, hey, let us come year to year and show you what we need and why we need it. Instead of just getting cut off, I would lobby to say, okay, let us make a presentation year to year why this is important. And also every year we'll be able to show we're still not impacting finishing the A-list on time and within the budget.
And that's why those 3 statements you made up front, 70% on A-list hard projects, 100% puts, and that gives us to a B-list, and then the program funds were funded for the whole years. I think those 3 statements set the tone for the rest of that discussion. So, Scott, you had a question. Carlos, did you finish?
Yeah, I'm just trying to, again, the question is going to come up, are we complete with the A-list pedestrian, I'm focusing on pedestrian improvements? We have completed what we expected to do for phase 1. I think at the last meeting, we said, no, we want to continue funding the programs going forward for the missing sidewalks. We do want to have that, the phase 1 and the A-list are one and the same. They're synonymous. I think we had that discussion last month. But I just feel like this presentation does not state that. It implies that we don't know what's going to happen with the pedestrian improvements, and that we don't have really a kind of a forecast of what's going on other than other information here. I'll leave it at that. I do understand we don't want too much information, but I think it doesn't really, if I read this here, it doesn't tell me what's going to happen with the pedestrian improvements and what that case is, why we should continue funding it or not. It doesn't answer that question either way.
And I don't think we were trying to answer that question. Now, I can come back. We're starting, actually, we've gone around the city and done the.
But that's the question specifically the board asked. We're finished. We should be complete with the pedestrian improvements. Phase 1 was brought up as that we should be at some point finished. When are we finished with pedestrian improvements? And that was what their question was. And I think.
And we're going to make the argument that would be finished after 10 years. Is really, because, like I said, the 7-year was really meant for the projects, not the programs. And that, I guess that's something we'll have to
Well,
make sure
I
we
think I've made
clarify
my point,
in
so.
RTA 3.
Scott?
Yeah, I guess I would just say that to me, the most important thing is that continuing to fund these programs does not take away from our ability to complete the location-specific A-list projects.
Yeah.
And it's not a either or. You can do both, and that's the way the program was established from the get-go.
And I think I did show a projection that showed that we could finish it.
Yeah, having examples of pedestrian improvements that have come along, that there's plenty more around the city to do, and that we plan on adding funds to this every year. To go back to Carlos's specific question, the Phase 1 question was kind of confusing because I don't know what document Phase 1 is in when the board was referring to it. And so whether that implies that if you've got Phase 1, you've got a Phase 2. So is an A-list, is A-list Phase 1 and B-list Phase 2? I don't know where that reference is, so.
Mr. Chair, that's actually in the ballot language itself. It says Phase 1 spelled out under the capital A. So it's actually in the ballot language.
With no dollar amounts, right?
No, there's no dollar
No,
amount.
I think the intent was that when we finish the A-list, we want to continue to have program money, and that's why we put it on the
It was confusing.
Yeah.
You see, that the ballot says Phase 1, which implies a Phase 2, a Phase 3, a Phase 4, and that was the question. Well, what is Phase 1? And
10 years.
10 years, right.
Reb had a question.
It's not a question, it's a point. Carlos keeps talking about 7 years. Actually, we are preparing the 6th-year budget for PPRTA. You keep referring to their original program estimate is 7 years because we're 2012 to 2019, but nothing went into effect until 2015. So we're only in the 6th year of budgeting. We're starting the second half of PPRTA 2 in terms of time. And I kept trying to, well, how the heck are they coming up with 7? I finally see it up there. I just started 15. That's when we start talking about PPRTA 2.
All right. Again, I hope this was beneficial. It's not necessarily an end product. It's something in work. I think we can refine it as we go forward into the budget. I would like to personally thank Rick and Bev and Mike, you, for being flexible, understanding, and thanks for putting this in a format and that we can make heads or tails of. So thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome.
All right, 7D, quarterly reports from member governments. Oh, wait a minute, excuse me, a C, change order and property acquisition report. Any questions on this report for the city? Seeing none, move on. Quarterly report, program status from Rick. Any questions or changes on that?
Actually, 2, if I could. Has anybody heard, and I don't see our Green Mountain Falls person here, their personnel changes, is that going to affect their maintenance program significantly? Are we aware?
I'm not aware.
Okay.
Their new town manager is starting this week.
Have they,
Angie Sprang.
okay, have they taken care of their public works issues?
I don't know about that one.
Okay. The other question I had was if I could get a little bit more information on the circle bridges. Originally, the construction dates on those was, well, it's supposed to be nearing completion this year, but that, because of the significant issues, they haven't started yet.
Which page are you on?
Hang on. Give me a second.
No, I can find it.
It's all right, I had it marked. 13 of the cities.
Cities, yeah.
Yeah. Right now, they're talking, the memo says that they're talking about they're evaluating the span configuration. But the original construction was supposed to be 2017 to 2019. They're already 5 years past their life, so I'm kind of wondering where we sit on that.
Didn't you give a briefing a couple months ago on the circuit
Circle bridges? 13 of the city's quarterly report.
So basically, we, based on the design and circular quality, we're looking at designing 2020 and construction 2022. Just move back.
Okay, so it's being pushed back, and the city is relatively comfortable that we're not going to have a Colorado Bridge kind of a situation where pieces of the roadway are going to disappear on us?
No. I'm not saying it won't happen. We're, again, that's why we're pushing this along.
Okay.
Because, there's been a lot of work put on that.
I know that project. I know that particular project's got a lot of issues. I just wanted to kind of get an idea because the last statement was a little vague about examining, evaluating lifespan and et cetera, et
So I
cetera.
think that's what we decided to replace it.
Okay, so we're looking at 2022. Okay.
All right, any other questions on that? How about report of recent board actions? Any quorums of that? I invite you to come to the board meeting if you're so inclined.
If I might,
You may.
if everybody will look at the back side of the memo, there's a joint meeting with the CAC and board scheduled next week, next Wednesday, 3 o'clock, after the board's regular meeting at 1:30. Yours doesn't
Larry?
have a backside either.
Just to let both of you know, Rick and Jim, I'm going to be out of town next week, so I will not be able to make that joint meeting.
Okay. I'll send out an email to everybody to try to get a confirmation of who's going to be there and how many, and make sure our seating is okay and all that kind of stuff.
Anything you want us to bring up?
I think sorry, Larry, at least the two items are going to be the program funds and maintenance of effort, because at the board meeting, they asked for each of the 5 member governments to provide their actuals for 2018, sort of as an exploratory to see if that might be a possibility for a new baseline actuals for 2018. So those will be the minimum of the two topics to be discussed: program funds and maintenance of effort.
All right. 8B, definitions of maintenance, we postponed that. Agenda items for next meeting, anybody have any burning issues? Okay.
Definitions of maintenance and capital.
Definitions of maintenance and capital. Okay?
Do we need to vote to postpone that, or
No.
We did.
We did already, first thing. Under communications, if any of you are so inclined, it just happens to be a very large regional pickleball tournament in town this weekend at Monument Valley Park. There's over 475 participants, 1,000 matches over the period of time. So if you hadn't seen pickleball, come out and watch. It's pretty exciting, and it's awesome.
Did you say P-I-C-K-E?
Pickleball. Yeah. Okay, anybody else have any communications? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Is that something with bumps? I'm serious.
Huh?
He's never heard of it.
I've never heard of it.
It's one of the fastest growing sports in the country.
Like I said,
There's over 1,100 members in the local Pickleball Association.
What kind of a ball is it?
It's a cross between tennis, badminton, and ping pong, played with a wiffle ball and a paddle. Kind of a little bigger than a handball paddle or a racquetball paddle, and not as big as a tennis racket.
people actually have time to do this shit.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have it physically. past CD more. I gotta go find out what's wrong with me.
Well, what's nice about it is that